picture this. It's the most tense, high-stakes moment imaginable on a global stage. We're talking a World Cup match. The score is deadlocked. The clock is literally ticking down to those final, agonizing seconds. And then, suddenly, a clear, undeniable foul right in the penalty box. Players are screaming for justice, right? The fans are holding their collective breath. The referee pauses. He's waiting for VAR to step in and save the day. And then, just absolute silence. No penalty is given. The game just moves on, and suddenly a whole nation's World Cup dream is hanging by a thread. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're not just looking at one bad call, we're going to really unpack the data, the policies, and the source material behind one of the most baffling controversies in modern sports. We need to figure out exactly how a system designed to completely eliminate errors might actually be protecting them instead. Let's get right into it. To really grasp the scale of this issue, we've got to set the scene. It's June 25, 2026, Colombia versus Sweden. The score is locked at a ridiculously tense 2-2. You know this environment. This is the kind of visceral, high-pressure crucible that defines a player's entire legacy. Every single pass, every tackle, it all carries the weight of a nation. So we're inside the penalty box. A Swedish player who is under immense pressure from a Colombian attacker handles the ball. And according to the reports, look, this wasn't just some subtle accidental graze. It was a clear violation. Naturally, the Colombian players swarm the referee. They are demanding a penalty. The official points to his ear. Okay, VAR is reviewing the play.
Now keep this number in mind, 89. That is the crucial minute of this match. Time is an absolute luxury that neither team has at this point. So when that referee pointed to his ear, pretty much everyone watching expected a stoppage, right? A jog over to the sideline monitor, a dramatic review, and a penalty kick that could literally decide the fate of the entire tournament. But after this agonizingly short pause, the referee just waves play on. No penalty, no explanation whatsoever. VAR stayed completely, mysteriously silent.
The fallout from that silence, it was absolutely instantaneous. Colombia's coach, Nestor Lorenzo, and his players were just in a state of pure outrage. But the game doesn't actually stop for disbelief. Sweden capitalized on the absolute chaos of that moment. They pushed the ball right down the pitch and actually scored the winning goal just minutes later. Colombia loses 3-2. And just like that, their World Cup hopes are pushed right to the absolute brink of elimination. Okay, moving on to Section 1, a pattern of errors, not just a one-off. All right, so let's really dive into this, because if we track backward just one single day, to June 24th, we find an almost identical scandal. This time, it's between Ghana and England. In the 79th minute, Ghana's Prince Adu is brought down by this massive, crunching tackle from England's Ezri Konsa. And the replays? They clearly showed Konsa catching the player's knee, missing the ball completely. It was a blatant foul, no question about it. Yet, exactly like the Colombia match, VAR was just crickets, completely silent. Fast forward to day 4, today, and that silence from the technology has been entirely replaced by the very loud outrage of experts who are basically confirming a massive systemic failure. And honestly, the frustration wasn't just coming from the fans in the stands. The failure to intervene in that Ghana match was so egregious, it actually prompted this stunned, almost bleakly funny reaction from Ghana's head coach, Carlos Queiroz. He famously told the press, VAR went to have a cup of coffee. I mean, it's a funny quote for sure, but it hits the nail right on the head. It perfectly captures the utter bewilderment these teams are feeling. They're playing under rules supposedly enforced by this multi-million-dollar tech system, and when the stakes are literally at their highest, it just seems to have clocked out for a break. But it isn't just the impacted coaches sounding the alarm here. Former official Keith Hackett actually went on the record to highlight what he specifically calls a series of poor decisions by referees. He stated unequivocally that these decisions fall way below the standard expected of a World Cup. And this right here is what shifts our explainer from just looking at fan outrage to a real, factual investigation. Think about it. When the experts who used to literally run the games are telling you the system is broken, well, you have to start looking at its foundational rules. Which brings us to Section 2, the core issue. The higher threshold policy. Now, what's really interesting about this is how things have changed behind the scenes. According to the source material, VAR was initially brought in with one very clear promise: to prevent clear and obvious errors. Sounds great, right? But then, FIFA's head of referees, Pierluigi Collina, rolled out this new policy. It's called the higher threshold. What this means is that it requires a significantly more severe infraction before VAR will even think about stepping in. Now look, the intention here makes sense on paper. They wanted to eliminate endless time wasting and keep the game flowing naturally. But the unintended consequence? It seems game flow is now being prioritized over actual, factual correctness. And that is exactly what's allowing these glaring errors to stand. And that leads us to Section 3, dangerous new gray areas. And this perfectly illustrates the problem. When you change the fundamental threshold of a rule, you end up creating these glaring inconsistencies. It leads to incredibly dangerous legal ambiguities, which, by the way, is exactly what the experts at the University of Law were warning everyone about. Just look at Jude Bellingham here. He was caught on camera covering his mouth to speak to an opponent. Now, under the new so-called Vinicius law, this is strictly supposed to be a straight red card offense, period. But guess what? He received absolutely no sanction. Meanwhile, we've seen other players completely sent off the pitch for making the exact same gesture. It really begs the question, when a rule is enforced based on some subjective threshold rather than an objective action, doesn't it stop being a rule and just become a dangerous lottery? So, where does this leave us? We're looking at a ridiculously high-stakes situation. Colombia was forced right into a corner, needing a win in their final group match just to survive the tournament. Naturally, this whole mess has sparked an absolute firestorm among pundits and fans alike, and they're heavily debating the fundamental fairness of the sport right now. Staying completely impartial here, we really have to ask the tough question. Is this higher threshold actually just acting as a shield for refereeing incompetence? Because ultimately, it all boils down to this massive clash at the heart of modern sports: game flow versus rule integrity. Is it really worth keeping the game moving smoothly if the final score doesn't actually reflect what happened on the field? Which leaves us with this final, kind of haunting question to ponder. You've got a handball so obvious that commentators were literally screaming into their mics, followed by VAR review that just moved on. Colombia lost 3-2, they faced elimination. So, based on the rules of the game we all thought we knew, did VAR just steal a World Cup dream? Or, and honestly, this might be the more unsettling thought, is the system actually working exactly as intended by FIFA? Is it designed not to find the absolute truth, but to just protect the referee's initial call at any cost? It's a hugely complex issue, wrapping up policy, tech, and human error all into one. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this breakdown helps you watch the next match with a much clearer understanding of the invisible rules governing the game. Keep questioning what you see out there on the pitch.